There's enough room for everybody. And when women are really operating at our fullest potential, I mean, we have the potential to add another 20 trillion to the global economy, just value creation. And it's like, as we come out of this pandemic and we're looking on the other side, I mean, things that worked in 2017, 2018, 2019, they don't work the same way anymore. It is a different world. And when I'm talking to, leaders, whether it be policy leaders or business leaders, and they're really struggling with how do we reactivate our economy? And I just, we have the facts. It's like, guys, I'm telling you, like when women and diverse leaders, the numbers are even higher. But it's like when women are supported in business, they tend to drive 12% higher revenue, 35% higher return on investment. And the kicker is we reinvest 90% of what we earn into our family, community, and ultimately the world.
Hey guys, welcome to the Rebirth podcast. I want to thank you guys for watching and for listening. In this podcast, we talk to individuals that have had to reinvent, recreate, and reimagine in order to grow. But before you watch and listen, I want to remind you to subscribe, to like, to review, and to share this episode and this podcast with everyone that you know. Thank you so much and enjoy. So Ingrid, what is going on? Thank you for joining the Rebirth podcast.
J.R., it is so awesome to see you. I swear, every time I see you, I just have this big smile on my face. You are just such an amazing human being. I love doing this with you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. I mean, this is a conversation that I've really been looking forward to. I know that you've been very busy on your initiative, which we're going to get into in a little bit, and pinning you down and finding that time. But so I really appreciate you carving out some time to talk to me, not only about what you're working on and the plan that you have, but also, your life and what your rebirth has been, because I know that you've experienced a lot of them as well, especially being an entrepreneur. People don't necessarily understand how difficult that is because they tend to look at the final product and not necessarily understand the journey and the process that goes into that and to creating that. And so I'm just so grateful for you to be on the podcast and to be able to see your face.
And I can say you too. I literally was saying to my team earlier today, I was like, there literally is no better person to host a podcast about rebirth or reimagination or transformation. I mean, this is like who you are as a person and just what you've done in your own life. And so to have this chance to actually sit down with you, and I don't know that we'd call this formal, but maybe more formal than over dinner. But,
yes.
This is just awesome.
We just need margaritas again, because last time we saw each other, we had dinner and margaritas, and we just need a margarita. Then it'd be like old times, right?
Totally, yes.
But
when we can get together again, for sure. And so the family's good, everybody's good.
Everybody
is
good.
Diane, Glenn's good on this side.
I will tell everybody you said hello. I know that I told her that I was talking to you. Diana said she was so happy. She was like, "Oh, Ingrid," and she was like so happy because I remember when we met you at South by Southwest, and this is right after we moved to Austin, and so we were here probably 8 months, and we went to South by Southwest, and we were going into one of the spaces where I was going to be speaking, and it was for a nonprofit. And I remember that I was walking by, you were standing there because you were exiting. And there was a group of people that you were talking to that were circled around you. And they, all of a sudden you looked over and you were like, "Hey." And I was like, "Hi." And I was like, "Hi."
He's like,
and you were like, "Hey." And they were like, "Oh my God, JR." And I was like, "Yeah." And all of a sudden we connected. We quickly introduced each other. And then we were like, we got to stay in touch. And I know you talked to my wife for a while as I was kind of being pulled. And then we caught up and we had dinner, and it was just like, it was so encouraging to hear not only your own personal journey, but also how you're now living this life of service and trying to impact and influence other people, but not just other people, but women. And it is so important because obviously since COVID, we know that women have been greatly affected, in the economy and the workspace, because most of them have said, I can't go and work right now. I got to go home and take care of my family and be that support system and make sure everything's functioning and everything's okay in that sense. And so we know that women have been affected greatly, but I would love to start. You talked about, in which I really appreciate you saying that, but you talked
Can
about
I just
how,
say, I loved that moment. I mean, I think I had just come out of speaking in something at the same place. I mean, at that same location.
yeah,
And when I saw you, I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to know this person. But again, you talk about life of service, and that's what you continue to do. And I think one of the things that like immediately connected us both, and you and I were talking a little about this offline, so I won't go there just yet. But we were talking about challenges, unique challenges that we have faced, that for one reason or another. I mean, mine was as a child, yours obviously as you went into the war, and it just completely changed your whole life. And these
right,
are moments that could have stopped us in our track, and
yeah,
people would have understood that. And
yeah,
instead it was like, how do we take these experiences, and as you, the name of the podcast, Rebirth, how do we take these experiences in a way and use them for good, and help more people and create more impact, and just live inspired lives that and that's what you do. And so I still, it was so fun getting together and bringing my husband along, and just that was a great evening. We have to do it again.
we'll do it again. We absolutely will do it again. But you just mentioned right now about how these moments, right? And you talked about yours as a child and mine as an adult. And and I think in order to understand the adult, you have to understand the child. And I mean, that is probably no better transition into this story that you told in your TED Talk when you talked about being in fourth grade and having complications, learning and processing information, and to the point where the principal said to your parents,
You she's
there's nothing you can
retarded.
do.
This was the word they used back then, which is obviously not PC, and it was back in the day. But essentially, he was just like, we cannot help her, and she can't stay here. She's a distraction to the class. She's failing out of school, which in our family, thank God, I've been blessed to be raised by parents. I'm at their house actually, but raised by parents who really believe that through education and service and hard work that truly anything is possible. But here their daughter was failing out of school, and now she's being told, they're being told, I'm being told, I can't even stay in school. And it led down this trajectory that for all intents and purposes could have spiraled out in a really bad direction. And it was very tough. The next 3 years were really, really tough. But it was also, again, one of those very early on rebirth moments of realizing, oh my gosh, what's possible.
And
So
what was great is that your parents, instead of just taking this information, because you said in that TED Talk that your parents were like, no, we don't. Like, I mean,
yeah,
I feel like I can listen to my mom just saying to a principal or somebody like, that's not my, and that's what parents do, right? Like they defend their children. But instead of your parents just taking that at face value and saying, okay, well, yeah, this is our child's challenges and we just got to like let her deal with it. Instead, she took no for an answer, meaning your mother. They started a new school. They ended up busing you to that new school. And then in the fifth grade, they learned that you had like some hearing complications. And that was the thing that was contributing to everything the principal was talking about in fourth grade.
yeah, like that is the thing that is so like the aha of the story, if you will, that, it's like, so what, to your point, I had hearing challenges, but what happened, and what was so amazing, and I continue, I mean, I think about it literally every day, because here, to your point, my parents just were not accepting that, okay, our daughter is learning disabled. She's never going to amount to anything, which is what they were being told.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure what to do with me. And so again, to your point, they went to bat for me during the summer between the third and the fourth grade with the school board, and essentially said, okay, if you're going to force our daughter to go to this special school, the way that the rules were written was I deserve, or I could get busing. It was a mandated thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, no, she's the only one from this area. We're not going to put resources on that to bus her to the school. And my parents were like, what are we going to do? Because my dad's working around the clock, traveling a lot. My mom's trying to raise all the kids. And they just pushed and said, you got to give her busing. Well, again, then I'll make this quick. But like today, you know how people, when you're sort of rassing your friends and you're like, oh, were you one of the short bus kids? And in fact, last night it came up. I was with family and they were like, oh, you were one of the short bus kids. And then it was funny because it's actually like, yeah, but I wasn't even on a short bus because they ran out of the short buses. So literally every day for the next 3 years, they would send a long yellow school bus that seats 66 kids. And I was the only kid on it. And the first day this bus pulls up in front of our house. So imagine I'm in the 4th grade. Okay. And I'm a pretty pale girl. My husband, they say he's even paler than me. And they're like, if you two ever have kids, they're going to be like see-through. Okay. So we're in Washington, D.C. It's just me. And my driver was this guy, like he opens the door, he gets off the bus. I'm scared half to death. He's shorter than I am. His nickname was Shorty. And he was this unbelievable African-American guy who wore this plaid shirt all the time. And literally, like it was almost like he felt the awkwardness of this whole thing going on. And he just like greeted me, brought me in, on the bus. And for the next 3 years, like he became my best friend. Wow. And he was like another father. And so as we would get to the school, special school for special kids, like here I am, the only kid on this bus. And so we were taking up space where all the buses were. And so like all these exceptions started being made at the school. They were like, oh man, this is trouble, let's get her in. And so I was like that last in, first out. Yeah. So they were always like, you come in at the last minute, so you're not blocking anybody. And then I'd run into school and classes start. And at the end of the day, I had a special parking spot for my bus, but at the time, all these kids were like, you're special, you're special, you're special. And every day I'd come home and, in tears. And I was like, Mom and Dad, the kids are making fun of me. And I would tell Shorty, and Shorty was like, you're amazing. You're, just an amazing person. And my parents would say, you are special. They're like, you are a very special person. You're meant to do great things in the world. They took what was so hard for me as a kid, felt awful. I was just stuck out like a sore thumb. And my best friend is my driver on my school bus. The whole thing was just surreal. And my parents just kept pressing for, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. And like we said, the punchline turns out to be that I had hearing problems, that once it was solved, like I started excelling. And I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it now, because I'm like, man, for anybody that's listening to this, I'm like, whether you're a parent with your child, and I always say to dads, especially with daughters, I'm like, the 4 most powerful words you could ever say to your little girl is, I believe in you. And my dad was constantly saying this. My mom is saying it, and they're just pouring hope into me and just promise and opportunity. Just, you got this, you are special, da, 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 da. And after that experience, like all of a sudden I showed up in the world. I'm like, man, like I'm pretty awesome. Like, but it went from like what could have been so negative. And I always say, just like, I always tell myself and hold myself accountable, just like, we all do it at different points. And it's like, let's not prejudge. If you come into the world with love, and if you come into the world with openness, and if you come into the world with this idea that everyone's got possibility and potential, and even when there's a tough situation or a negative situation, how might we instead look at that situation in a way that's like, this is happening for purpose? And just like what happened to you in 2003, this is happening so that, as awful, I can't even imagine. My story is no comparison to yours. And you took this and you were like, how does this redefine who I am? How do I show up into the world and pour hope and possibility into more people? And that to me is so extraordinary, because I don't know a single person on earth that hasn't gone through some kind of completely crappy situation that everybody and their mother would understand if they just gave up. And it's like, the more you can see and hear these stories, it's like truly anything is possible. But that's where hearing the stories and surrounding yourself with people who pour into you, that's why these kinds of things are so important. So thank you for having me.
No, I mean, even though you say what I went through, JR, is nothing in comparison to you, well, I can equally say that to somebody else who has gone through something more tragic than I have, right? But at the end of the day, it's not about that comparison. It's about the simple fact that the lesson in that allowed you, Ingrid, to then begin to thrive, like not only in school, and then of course as you evolved into an adult, but then also the thing that allowed me to thrive as a young 19-year-old that started to figure out my space in the world was having people in our lives that were willing to actually listen to us. And I always talk about the importance of listening versus hearing. And there's a difference, in my opinion. Hearing is what you do, sometimes we do to our spouses, right? Like they're talking and you're like, I hear you, I hear you, I hear you. But
Yeah.
listening is when you're actively present and you can almost repeat back every single thing that person just said to you. And you had somebody that was willing to listen to you, your parents, Shorty. I had my best friend that was willing to listen to me when I was in this real fragile state. And it was from that birth this person that all of a sudden people have come to know as JR, and this person that people have come to know as Ingrid. And so, obviously that life of service and just that passion now, that possibility, the making the impossible possible, which is something that you really talk about. I mean, you took that and you just freaking ran with it. God, like, there's people that say to me, like, JR, when we read your bio, and we're like, you done this, like, and it's just a long run-on sentence. But when I read your bio, yours is the same way. It's like, what did she do? What is she doing? And what is she planning on doing? And I want to give people a little context as well, because you ended up going to, and help me with the timeline here, but I know you ended up going to work for Dell. I know that you really wanted to get into the technology space, and you sought out a mentor, and you ended up at Dell, and you were incredibly successful during the time you were at Dell. But please tell me about that period in your life.
Yeah. So, and I love hearing this. I'm like, oh my gosh, we can really talk for a while. And I think, too, again, for people listening to this, it really just is that nod to like truly, I was having a conversation with, someone actually, I'm writing my first book. And so this whole book, it's called Be the One. But what we're really, working to put words around is like, how do you stand, that term unicorn is like often used, and I love it, but it's like, how do you stand in this place of being so unique in your gifts while at the same time we all want that sense of belonging, we want to be listened to, we want to be understood, we want to contribute, so it's just interesting to think, like, as we all really allow ourselves to own those unique talents and gifts and bring them out into the world in a way that can serve others, it's like truly anything is possible. And so I just, amazing conversation. But so my career started earlier on. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur, former business television host with CNBC. And just this whole process of like, I'll cut through some of the chase here because we could talk about this for a while too. But when I started out in technology, I was not raising any money. Like, I could not get anybody to listen to me, and except my parents, God bless them. But I really believed in what we were working on in the first venture, and I remember trying to raise money. And here, this is back in the day when like people were raising, guys were raised. And God bless the guys. I always say, we're not going to elevate if we're not doing it, locked arms going together. But the guys were like sketching stuff on napkins and raising millions and millions of dollars. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I just couldn't get it done. And being told, Ingrid, you don't look like, act like, sound like, or talk like any of the CEOs that are getting funding. You are never going to raise any money. And, I know we all have our stories, but it was for women and diverse leaders. We have a distinct set of challenges. And that's just one example. Another example on, as I would keep going out to these pitch meetings, in my 20s, I'd wear fake wedding rings so that I'd hopefully not be asked out when I'm trying to have a business meeting. And this is just all the time, and it's so interesting because it's just life. It's just, we're progressing through history. Things are changing, and it was all the guys there. But I will say back in 2010, after having done a number of ventures, some did well, some failed miserably. I'd done the television work, and I'm a very faith-based person. And I was on a ranch, Dallas, Texas, and I just decided, I just had a couple of successful exits. And I just, in prayer, I just said, God, whatever you have, whatever the calling is on my life, whatever that is, I will 100% honor that. Just let me know very clearly what that is. The next day, I literally am in the car, dirt road, Dallas, Texas. And I was like, God, please just tell me what it is, whatever it is. And I was so scared because I was like, wow, if you hear, like, we need you to go to the jungles of Uganda and serve women down there. Like, I made the promise and I would go. The call I heard instead was empowering 1 billion women by 2020. And that's what led me to Dell, because after my freak out moment and dropping 50 bajillion F-bombs, which is not my normal way of speaking, but I was like, what does that even mean? This is crazy. And then I just knew, I was like, okay, let's calm into this. How would one person potentially have the ability to set a structure that could reach this many people in that period of time? And I knew I needed a global technology partner. And that's what brought me into partnership with Dell Technologies and Michael Dell and a guy named Steve Felice, who was president of Dell, it was actually Steve who kept sticking his neck out and seeing this possibility of reaching more entrepreneurs, reaching women, reaching diverse leaders. But how do we actually do it? And he and I, a 30-minute meeting turned into a 3-hour meeting. We handshook on the deal in the meeting that basically he said, I went in there. I didn't even know exactly what I was going to pitch him, because I was like, he's going to think I'm crazy if I tell him I'm here to empower 1 billion women and I need a global tech partner. Like, one of my colleagues that has seen what I can do said, don't ever tell anybody that. They'll think you're crazy. And I went into the meeting and just was like, I have to be authentic. I have to tell him this, and in his mind, and this is also something that happens when listeners, all of us who say, I'm scared half to death, but I'm going to trust that inner voice. And I'm going to do that thing that so many people are going to say, this is impossible to do. You can't do it for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I'm just going to trust this. And I'm going to take that next step forward. And I'm just going to see what happens. And for me, when I put that out there to Steve Felice, what was calculating in his mind was, it could have been like, who is this crazy woman in front of me? Like, exit stage left. The other thing, though, and what I've realized about people who do global work like Michael Dell, there's so few people that actually ever say what they really intend to do, what the real call is on their life, because they think people are going to think they're crazy. It's so rare that it's like this circle of people are like, once you hit it, once they meet you, once they heard this with me,
like, you're in that circle now forever.
You're in the circle.
Yeah.
And basically on the spot, he was like, okay, if we team up together, and she's even part of the way successful of reaching 1 billion women, and Dell's the brand that teamed with her, like, that's great for business. And it was. I mean, we built a ginormous business off of this over the next 3 years. We reached 600 million people in 1 year alone. I mean, the thing just blew up. And so that's that, like, we tend to overcomplicate things because we self-sabotage, or we have these confidence or whatever. And it's like the magic happens when you just trust, like, what is going on here? And let me be authentic in what my call is and watch what happens.
But you had to, like, take that time to do that work. And that's kind of what the theme that we have discovered over the course of the life of this podcast thus far, is that every guest, in order for them to have that rebirth and then have that clear understanding of, God or the universe, what they want them to be doing, you have to be able to look within. You have to be able to look out into the world and to God and say, hey, what is it? And as crazy as it may sound to you, it's not always supposed to make sense to you in the moment, right? It's supposed to make sense as you get yourself into it, and then it makes sense. But to be able to trust that process and go with it and follow that instinct, I mean, that is where it's at. And that's what separates, I believe, people that understand their purpose and then end up getting into a life of service to help influence other people, as those that are willing to actually listen to what the universe and God is telling them. I when you say that, I'm just like, God, I'd like, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and then sometimes I'm
yes,
like, yes.
yes, yes, every single
Now
thing
it
that you're
takes
saying.
driving over an IUD or getting sent off to the special school where you're like, what is the point of living? I mean,
Yes.
we do have these moments that are really, it's the dark night of the soul, right? And you're
Hmm.
just like, I don't even know. And I don't even know what this is about. And that is freaking scary. That is really scary. And that's where, and even as we get older, as I have gotten older, there still are there's this constant, it's that hero's journey, right? It's like, it's always a cycle. Like things are never just going to be perfect, but if they were and we were cruising, I always tell people in our business, I'm like, you know what, guys, like, um, it's expect mistakes are going to happen, and that's okay.
Hmm.
Because if we're playing the safe game, that means we're doing what everybody else is doing. And that
Right.
means we're playing the safe game. We're not pushing, we're not striving, we're not innovating, we're not trying new things. But in that process of innovating, as you know, my husband was a pro skydiver for most of his life, his professional career. And it's like this whole analogy of like jumping off the cliff, hoping your wings will fly on the way down. I'm like, I swear that's got to be why I took up skydiving, because you jump out of these planes and you're like, all right, I'm going to figure this out. But that really is this process of innovating and trying new things that you got to keep pushing, knowing it's going to be uncomfortable. Uh, but then something's going to open, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, go with it, hear it, listen, go, and things
Yeah.
start dialing in. And then you're going to reach another point down the road where it's going to happen again. And then you're like, what do we do now? And that's just part of innovating and growth, right?
Yeah,
Anything else is just
absolutely.
stagnant, and we're like Walking Dead,
Yeah,
really.
exactly. Like I heard there's a gentleman that I've had on the podcast, and he referred to it as living dead. And I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of us, unfortunately, that are walking, this beautiful earth, that are living dead. We're alive, but there's no real direction and understanding of what it is that we're trying to do and need to be doing. So let's talk about this message that was sent to you about empowering a billion women. I know that is what you're working on now. I mean, you are traveling. You are working with people all over the world. Tell me about this initiative of EBW.
Yeah, well, see, and that, like, again, goes to what we're just talking about. When I came out of Dell, I took some time off. I was making investments. I mean, I always say, God bless Dell, because I always say I couldn't do things at the scale that I do them today had I not had that experience. Because frankly, like, there aren't that many companies that are out there that give you the potential to reach 600 million people in 1 year
Yeah,
alone, you know? And
absolutely.
so and as I'm saying that, I'm like dancing with the stars.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
isn't
You
that
you
amazing? It built this
you
platform.
needed that platform, and that's kind of, I want to circle back on this question, but I mean, for Michael Dell, for the company Adele, for the other gentleman that you said is the president, I mean, for them to, as males, as
Oh,
men, to look at you and say, we don't really understand what it is you're trying to do, but we believe in you and we're going to gamble, and that's essentially what empowering a billion women is all about, right? It's about getting everybody behind this initiative and understanding that women, it's not about empowering women to essentially replace everybody that's already out there. It's about, there's enough room for everybody.
there's enough room for everybody. And when women are really operating at our fullest potential, I mean, we have the potential to add another 20 trillion to the global economy, just value creation. And
Mm,
it's like, as we come out of this pandemic and we're looking on the other side, I mean, things that worked in 2017, 2018, 2019, they don't work the same way anymore. It is a different world. And when I'm talking to, leaders, whether it be policy leaders or business leaders, and they're really struggling with how do we reactivate our economy. And I just, we have the facts. It's like, guys, I'm telling you, like when women and diverse leaders, the numbers are even higher. It's like when women are supported in business, they tend to drive 12% higher revenue, 35% higher return on investment. And the kicker is we reinvest 90% of what we earn into our family, community, and ultimately the world. And so it's like the fastest engine to getting our economy back on track is really this integration and inclusion of women and diverse leaders. When we work in diverse teams, we're 41%, more productive. Like the numbers the numbers are the numbers. And so where I spend a lot of time now, even as I talk to leadership, is instead of it being the idea of women, diverse leaders being this thing that's like, okay, we're supposed to talk about it because it's the right thing to do, 10 years ago. Like now, I mean, Dell gave me it was like the training wheels, and we've only built off of that to be like, yes, it's the right thing to do, but it is the smart business move to do. So let's focus on that, because in the world of economics, it comes down to business. So it's like walking into these meetings and being like, these are the numbers. This is how it works. Here's the system where you can do more of the integration, whether it's leadership in your teams or it's procuring with more women and diverse suppliers. Like the numbers don't lie. This is what it looks like. And here's all of our case studies now to prove that. So
why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that you see when women are a part of this? I mean, all the stats and the numbers you just provided. What have you discovered is the fundamental reason? I mean, there's probably more than one, of course, to contribute to that.
What I said, like, and I'm like, we're so freaking happy to have a seat at the table that it's like, and I don't have my own, human babies. I have 4 4-legged babies. I love kids. I just got married later, but I'm like, I imagine what people describe like this mama bear mentality that we're like, all right, like we got a seat at the table. I'm going to take care of my family. I got to take care of the people that I love. And because there's not all this history of this is how things have been done, we're left in a position where it's like, yes, we need to, that's that whole thing we were talking about before. We're different and we want to belong. Okay. But we now have a seat at the table, and it's like, so how do we bring our unique thinking, do it in a way that doesn't disrupt the apple cart so we can all work together? But we're so freaking happy to have that opportunity. It's like, I'm going to bust through walls now to do whatever it takes to succeed, because I've got to make this work for all kinds of reasons. And I really that's what I see it come down to. And it's for women and diverse leaders across the board,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've done some work. I work with an organization called A Call to Men, and their initiative is to, educate men and empower men and teach men how to respect women and help women, in violence against women and the way we treat women and how we should elevate women. And for me, that's incredibly important because women, are so important in my life because my mother's single mother, my wife, I have a daughter. Women are. I had nurses that were like women that, were just incredible. Like they were doctors. There's just been so many women that I can point to in my life that I'm just like, such amazing individuals. And so the reason I got involved with that organization because of that passion of like, no, how do we help women? And what I've learned is that very thing is you hear women constantly talk about, it was so hard for us to even get into this role that now that we're here, unfortunately, we're going to do everything and anything that we can to leverage it and to build on it. And so unfortunately, what that means is sometimes they sacrifice their own health. Sometimes they sacrifice the well-being of their relationship with their family because I just got to stay committed to this job and I got to work. I can't afford to sit here and say, I'm going to take vacation, or I'm going to do what maybe my male counterparts can comfortably say and do. I don't have that luxury. And that's unfortunate that exists, but it does seem to be that point of what you talk about. Women are like, we're happy to be here and we're going to do everything that we possibly can to make sure that you don't regret the decision that you gave up, the opportunity that you gave us.
Absolutely. And I think, 100%. And I think one of the things that we see, and it's learning for all of us, right? It's like, you asked me about when I first started EBW, it was, again, one of those rebirth moments. I literally said, okay, let's replicate what we did at Dell because we know this works. Okay. One of the things we did at Dell that like grew the business so much was we said, well, if we want to encourage more women, entrepreneurs, diverse leaders to do business with us, we got to make our stuff affordable for them to even do business with us. So we started setting up all these programs that were free that would help them. But then we launched a fund. And we said, let's make it affordable now to actually, like, let's finance these entrepreneurs. And, as they now we're doing business with them. And there's a long-term, win-win-win out of all of this. So we started EBW. I teamed back up with Dell. We launched a $100 million fund buying for women entrepreneurs. And for the next 3 months after launching that fund, not one woman showed up. The men did. Wow. And it literally said by and for women entrepreneurs. And in that moment, like, I was so like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Because coming right off Dell, I was getting recruited left and right, a lot of money, and my husband was like, take it. And that's when you just, again, it's this uncomfortable moment of being like, I have to honor my own integrity and my call. And the call is to empower 1 billion women. And if I'm really going to live a life of integrity, I can't just turn away and do this. And I can't just, because there was part of me that was like, well, screw it. We're going to do the fun. And I'll work with the guys because that's a lot of fun. And the women will eventually show up. And I was like, but that's not what the call is. Call is like, how do we change this? And so as we began to then peel that onion back, that was uncomfortable because peeling the onion back was more money, more time, more confusion. Like, why weren't women showing up? What actually was going on here? But it was in all of that uncovering that we got to the bottom of what really holds so many of us back. Women will say the number one thing that holds us back in business is lack of access to capital, and that is not true. And one of the things that I do with women, I'm like, we have to have these authentic, real conversations, or we're never going to move the needle. The real conversation is there is money out there. We're just not even showing up for it because, frankly, we're scared half to death. We lack that confidence gap is a real thing. And we lack confidence because we lack the know-how. We change that know-how when we have mentorship. And that's why, again, things like this are so important, to just share these stories, share the pathway, find a pathway, create pathways to help other people have that seat at the table. Because with that, it builds that confidence. It builds that know-how. And once you know how to do something, it's like riding a bike. Then you just ride the bike, you know? So I think for both of us, it's just this, holding ourselves, our colleagues, our communities accountable to say, if we're really going to rebirth together, we all have to show up and we're going to have to do the work. It doesn't just magically happen. It usually comes after some disastrous experience that forces us to reevaluate why we're even here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a term, you guys have a lot of terms in the EBW website where you talk about like she-conomy and that just really caught my attention. Obviously, is it she-session? Is it, recession, but she-session? And I really want to be able to dive a little bit into that is like, what is the goal of the she-conomy project? And what are you working on? What are you doing?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, it's so after what happened on that fund, what became really the legacy of the business was we realized, first of all, what EBW needed to do was set up scalable mentorship. 80% of women want mentors, but 80% of those women want to be mentored by other women. The challenge is so few of us have ever raised money, sat on boards, less than 2%, ever get over the $1 million mark, less than 0.003 ever get over the 8-figure mark. And we've done all of this. And it's like, okay, so let's share it in a scalable way. So we have education and community. And then when COVID hit, we have technology and innovation. So education, community, technology, innovation. And when COVID hit, we were looking at how are we going to survive as a business? The She Session was happening. If you look at December 2020, 100% of the job loss, which still I find hard to believe, but it is in the media. They will say 100% of the job loss was women. 5.4 million jobs were lost, by women during COVID. And exactly to the point of what you said earlier, The moms are staying home school, teaching their kids, taking care of the families, and the men are too. But it was disproportionately hitting the women. So the She Session, the fastest engine of getting our economy back on track, is now in recession. So we said, let's set up the She Economy Project to now start tackling down the social, health, and economic issues that create opportunity for women everywhere. And so what we set that platform up, and then we said, okay, now let's look at our business. How do we create a really solid, strong business foundation that financially can fuel all of this work? We were already doing the social issues. We were already doing the economic and education issues. What we weren't addressing was health. And you know better than anyone, after what happened to you in 2003, when you're not well, when you're just trying to fight for your life, or you're worried about your wife or your kids now, like, you could care less about anything else. Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
So we got involved in the health business. We set up a distribution company, and that company, now we work with governments, we work with healthcare companies. We basically are a distributor of medical supplies, and that company just grew huge in no time. And that is now the solid financial engine that fuels everything else. And we use our platform to connect more buyers, more investors to more women and diverse-led business owners through the She Economy Project. Our goal there is to basically help facilitate $100 billion worth of transactions to the women and diverse economy by 2030. So it's amazing. Yeah.
That's incredible. There was a stat on the site as well that talked about how, and I may be off a little bit, so I know you'll correct me, but 80% of women make healthcare decisions for their families. And I'm curious, how does that work with, during the time of COVID and informing people to get the vaccine, to not get the vaccine? I mean, how is EBW doing work in that space as well?
Yeah, we actually, exactly for that stat. So we were tapped on the shoulders by HHS and ASPR, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, as the vaccines were rolling out. We all saw in the news it was a little bit disastrous. They're trying to figure it out. Operation Warp Speed. God bless these guys. They've done an amazing job. And at first it was like, oh my gosh, what is this going to look like? How do we get it out? And what they were seeing right up front was women in diverse communities, especially rural communities, were not adopting this at the rate that was necessary to get us to herd immunity. So we got tapped on the shoulders and they said, can you help us? Can you galvanize your 251 million reach network of women around the globe to hear what's happening, to understand, to learn about the vaccines, the monoclonal antibody therapies? Those were the therapies that the then President Trump, when he got sick, he went to the hospital and people were like, whatever he did, it's only for rich people.
Right.
That at first that was the case, but or if you're president. But the United States, the government invested heavily into making that available to everyone, but nobody knew about it. So we were brought in. They said, let's create a pilot strategy that we can then replicate across the country. And our pilot community was a place called El Centro. It was just above the Mexico border in El Centro, Imperial Valley, California.
Oh, yeah.
The majority of people did not even speak English, weren't on the web. It was like a really tough task. But I tell you what, JR, like, my Christmas holidays were spent between El Centro and DC, flying back and forth. And it was a freaking war zone. I can't even imagine what you guys literally went through in a real war zone. To sit in the hotel and it was this constant barrage of helicopters flying right overhead, sirens, people were just dying left and right. And it literally, that community was getting decimated, and it was really hopeless. And I'm so honored and proud that it was, all the work goes to this great team I have at EBW that came in and basically activated the women, galvanized the community, and started bringing the women together. And all of a sudden you started seeing, within 10 days, we more than doubled the ideal results of what Asper was trying to accomplish in El Centro. And we basically worked with Dr. Adolf Edward, who ran the hospital, and got the city, worked with them to get it turned around and build a model that now, we continue to talk about and work on across the United States. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, it's just when we all come together, what we can accomplish. That's what I take away, and how, your team, women, were able to come together and say, no, we're going to figure this out. There may be a sense of hopelessness here, but there's still hope in that word. So we're just going to find a way to just focus on that part of that word versus the lessness, right? So your goal now by 2030, what do I do? What do the listeners do to help EBW reach this empowering a billion women by 2030? What is it that we can do? The everyday person listening right now that is like, I'm fired up. I not only want to have a margarita with Ingrid and J.R., but now I also want to learn more about this initiative and what I can do, or what my company or what my brand or what my platform can do to support it. What do we do?
Thank you for asking. I'm like, yes, let's start with that margarita. I'm like, come on, let's do that. Yes, for sure. That right there, that'll solve the world's problems. Right there.
Exactly.
Let's be honest. But, thank you for asking, because it's really, we hope that will, just that's what we want. And it's so, if you're a corporation, it's like, so the main site where you can sort of come on and find everything is at ebw2020.com. So if you're a corporation or you're an investor, it's like, come and find these amazing businesses that are in the portfolio. Like, come explore. Let us help you figure out, what are some strategies that can help you have more diversity and inclusion in your business or through procurement. What does that look like? Let us help you develop some strategy and connect you with people who can actually do the work. Come there, be part of it. Come tell us what you're doing. If you're a woman, diverse leader, and you're like, I really want to be part of that ecosystem. We built what I wish we would have had when I first started out, and even for those early years. And it's like, if you're somebody that's like, I want to be part of that, I want to be in that network, it's like, come be part of the education, join the community. You can find all of it at ebw2020.com. And it's like, really just get engaged. And my only ask is that, that we this really goes back to my parents and kind of the story that you said about your best friend when you ran over the IUD, who was there to support you, and my parents who were like, you got this. And my only ask is for those listening to, really challenge ourselves, especially in this time when things are so fragile. I mean, in every aspect, social, health, economic, for everybody, how can we come out with a little bit more love, a little bit more openness, and just an attitude of, instead of prejudging, if I'm hearing something that feels a little bit weird or off or uncomfortable because I'm talking to somebody who approaches things differently or might not look like, act like, sound like, or talk like we're trying, what if we thought about this from the perspective of what might the opportunity be? And then just press yourself a little bit deeper to say, how can I really engage? Because I promise you, when you do that, just like you were asking me, JR, you give an underrepresented community member an opportunity. And I swear, literally watch what happens to your work, your life, your business, and the loyalty that's there is unbelievable. So let's work together to create and open up more of those opportunities so that all of us now in this new economy can thrive together. That's really what I aspire to see happen.
Oh, I love all of that. And I'm so grateful for that day in Dallas, Texas, when you're driving on that dirt road and you asked that question, that very important question, and that very important answer came down, and you listened to it, you paid attention to it, and you've been leading with your heart ever since. And with everything that you do, and especially this initiative. So I applaud you. We're going to put in the show notes, obviously, the website for everybody to click on and go just explore and get lost on the website, learn more about it, follow on social media as well. You're always posting things that you're up to, and you're constantly just out and about, just, doing the work, and it's incredible. And I just know that I'm always here to support you and support this initiative, because I believe in women. I believe that women have, everything that we're looking for in order to be able to, succeed and push everything that we're trying to push forward. So thank you for your continued work, and thank you for making the time to come on. And we will have that margarita soon.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So say
All
hi
right.
to Diana and Lauren, and just a hug to all of you. Thank you again for having me. I just think the world of you, and it just warms my heart. We're having this time, and thank you for your great work. Really, it's guys like you who make the world possible. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ingrid. Blessings to you and the family. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. I know Ingrid is super busy with her movement of empowering 1 billion women. And it's for that reason I want to thank her for taking the time to come on the Rebirth podcast and not only talking about this incredible movement, but also reminding us how important it is to not give up on each other and to listen to one another, right? So if you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to share, subscribe, and be sure to follow me at I am J.R. Martinez on Instagram to learn more about me and, of course, these amazing guests. Until next time, this is Rebirth.